First of all, I'd just like to thank ABARES for inviting me down to show our experience and give everyone some insight what their natural capital, especially if they're farming, what the potential of that can be. And it's really been a journey over like 20 years, and we've really had that experience from the farmer focus as that's what we were doing at the start. And it's that experience has really kept our focus on the dollar return, and then the carbon side of it's come on from that, just from the results from what we've been doing. So I'll flick it through the next one. That might be back, is it? Here we go. First of all, I started out dairy farming, and in that I was 20, went out and bought a dairy farm and sort of worked day and night trying to improve that as best I could, and got bored after 2 or 3 years, started agricultural earth moving, and fairly busy doing that, booked out 2 years ahead. Then sort of got to this point where I was applying quite a bit of fertiliser to the property to increase the yield, and I really wound that up. We were doing quite well financially, so I poured a lot of fertiliser on, fantastic, huge increase in yield, everything was looking great. Did the same thing again the next year, and as the summer came on, my farm went brown, everyone else was still green, and really that was just frustration, like what's going on. Asked the fertiliser company, what's happened here, and it virtually came out of their mouth, well, you need more fertiliser. Well, I put 3 or 4 times on what I normally would, so I'm not really going to take that on board. So then it was off into doing research on different farming systems all around the world, sort of a fair bit in the States, New Zealand, and a little bit in Europe we had a look at, and virtually came back down to getting the best out of the natural system that's in the soil by balancing the nutrition available to the plants. So we'd been down that, we virtually instantly had a mineral-based fertiliser business. That took off, we were flat out doing that. Then we're still passionate about what we were doing and achieving the results we're seeing that we're achieving in the soil. So then it came down to, it was really from a scientist, Arden Anderson from the States. He was out teaching virtually from the soil right through to human health, and they were doing 5 crops of maize per year in a Mexico desert, 15mm rainfall, and here we are with a 900mm rainfall. Like, well, it was 15 inch actually, but yeah, the actual difference in capability, why can't we do that? So I looked at making a machine that would plant maize into the pasture and would naturally graze it off, and then the pasture would come back. A couple of years before we had time to put it together, and within 7 days, green stripes down the paddock. So then we started looking into it and understood what it was doing. It was aerating, top dressing, and at that time we weren't even planting any seeds with it. We were just using it to see what it would do when we first started. So that sort of led us on to doing a commercialisation Australia trial in 2014. The results came through for that, and we got like a 23% increase in yield and a really big carbon increase. So Dr. Martin Stapper did the research on that and put all that together. It took us up to the carbon conference, and then we got a fair bit of focus on what the carbon side of things was. So then we had a lot of interest from carbon project providers, and Matthew Walkland from AgriProve organised Bootstrap to come in and do the testing and run through that whole carbon aspect, which really got us to the point, well, it's a bit over 12 months ago now, with the first carbon credits in the world for soil under the Paris Agreement rules. Now, we've just got the second year of that done, so we've come through with that. Like on that slide there, you've got your first year, we got 406 carbon credits, and then the second year we got 1,400. Well, that 1,400 is half what they discounted us on the first year, they didn't believe how much carbon was possible to build in the soil. So now that we've done it 2 years in a row, they've back paid us on that. So it's not a big jump, it's just a little bit bigger, from 12.2 to 13.7. And it's really, the more cycling nutrients you've got in the soil, the easier it is to build the carbon. Then this is some statistics that we've got out of the trial that we did back with Commercialisation Australia. Now, like the plant available nitrogen up 122% without applying any. This is really the aeration and function of the soil, the natural function of the soil, able to do that. And all those nutrients are coming more available in the soil profile, mainly because you're enhancing the fungal population in the soil. If you're fertilising, grazing and farming around that bacterial domination of the soil, well, you really end up with concrete, because it's the fungal population that maintains aeration in your soil structure and maintains that fertiliser use efficiency. You can actually get a lot of that locked up nutrient in your soil back available without applying any, because there's quite often 10, 15 times more nutrient in the soil than you need to grow your plants. This is how it works under the soil. So that's penetrometer readings down from the surface. The key is the disturbed area. Now, the blue lines is the Soilkee across the trial plots. Now, normally they're rotating blades on the machine. Rotating blades will create a hard pan underneath. But because we've actually got that nutrient cycling happening, it's actually softening the soil underneath the blades. So you go round the paddock in one direction, then you change direction. You 3 or 4 times through, the whole paddock softened and deepened and cycling those nutrients. There's a lot of locked up nutrients in the soil and in your stubble and your root systems. So that's where we're getting our main improvement in nutrient to grow plants. This is after the machine's been through. Really looks like it's disturbed quite a bit. It's only 17% disturbed on the surface. So some of the trench is flicking some dirt up and covering up some of the green matter, which then creates a green manure crop, which is the main thing that's feeding the fungal population in the soil. So you've aerated it a bit mechanically. At the end of the day, the mechanically aeration doesn't really last, where the fungal population maintains that aggregation in your soil. So that's the main improvement of the nutrients coming through. Then it sort of picks up to the ability of the plant to photosynthesize. So that really gets the sugars up in the plants and coming out of the root systems. Therefore, the palatability of the pasture is greatly increased. So like in the sort of background there, you've got a crop right over the back, and in sort of halfway towards the animals on the dam bank there, you've actually got where we planted the crop first time in the paddock. This is back in 2014. Where the cattle are on the dam bank there's a trough right beside that where they've been walking over it. But in the foreground, you've got all that pasture, which was their standard pasture. They haven't eaten any mouthfuls out of that pasture in 5 weeks. So they've preferred the crop that was being strip grazed off to them, and they were eating that virtually to the dirt. It was that favourable for them. This is another trial that we did after that with the Catchment Management Authority. And like the 3 core samples there, you can see that how much moisture there is on the right-hand side one, with all that dark effect of the carbon building up in the soil. Now, you can see the different species growing, and the more favourable ones are dominating where the Soilkee's been. But the main effect is over on the available nutrients on the soil test. If you look at like your calcium, you've got 2,399 on the control, 5,788. That's without applying any lime. So it's the nutrients being accessed by the system, mainly the fungi, bringing that available to the plant. And right down the whole line, like there's so much more available without applying it. So the reserve that most farms or soil have got is really quite remarkable. Which brings us to like the photo with the people there in the crop. That is achievable. And we've also got underneath that, like the one near the fence there with his shorts on, he's standing on what it would have been if we didn't plant into that with the machine. But that pasture is still underneath the crop, and it's still green right down to the surface of the soil, because as you're getting a large amount of nutrients from the whole spectrum of bacterial and fungal supplied to the plant, the photosynthesis of that plant is so much higher that it needs very, very little sunlight, and it still performs very well. When you've got a plant photosynthesising really, really well, it actually puts a lot more sugars back into the soil. And when you've got them 2 metres high, like in this photo, they're solar panels that are on that hectare are phenomenal. So the sugars that can then create and pump down into the soil profile is, yeah, that's how we're getting our carbon built up, the main part of it. But then the palatability is a little bit lost in that 5-month crop, like it's 14.5 tonne dry matter crop. Now, the palatability and just say the protein, it's down at like 14%. When the animals go and graze that, they'll leave 25-30% of that. Then we'll mulch that in, and that'll go into soil as a food source and stubble worked into the soil. So we're not utilising all of that crop for the animals, but we're utilising that crop for building carbon and getting paid for the carbon, and warming up the soil profile for the winter months as well. So every bit grown is still a benefit. And this is this photosynthesis, ground cover, multi-story. The big thing that I learned only probably 2 years ago was the actual sunlight directly is not that good for photosynthesis. It's the indirect sunlight that is the best. So when you've got a high crop, you're actually producing a lot more sugars and a lot more energy in that profile captured from the sunlight. The way that we're seeing our legumes perform, like the second photo in, is like a 2 week since planting pea plant. Now, that's already taking off at a phenomenal rate. Then you've got the next one's a root system of a pea plant. The nodulation of nitrogen nodules on that plant's root system is not just down the main core trunk of that root system, it's spread right out over the whole root system of the plant. The measurement of the sugar coming out of a plant root system on a farm in the soil is pretty hard. Like, it's very hard to judge that, but when you're getting the end result of 3 tonne of carbon per hectare, it's got to have come from somewhere. Having a look at the root systems on every pea plant that's 5 or 6 per square metre, and the amount of nodulation is being fed by the sugars coming out of that root system feeding the bacteria. So when the select pea grower, which supplies Safeway, comes out and has a look and he goes, wow, that is 10 or 20 times more nodulation than they're getting on their peas. So that's where we're getting that huge increase of nitrogen, and we're getting a huge increase of sugars going into the soil. To the point where the soil's been fed up, and that balanced biodiversity in the soil, we've actually got a lot of peas having double pods. So that really amazed the pea grower, that the proportion of double pods makes it very efficient. I better flick through a few of these, but in this, it's really the supporting life in the soil that actually is your resource to mine the nutrients out of your land. So that's where that really enhancing and feeding that under our system. The water holding ability is so much better once you've got aggregated soil. And then this is a photo of soil cores. When ABARES were down at their regional outlook, they came out and had a look at the farm probably 6 months ago, and they took these cores on that day. So 15 millimetres rain 2 or 3 days before. The bottom core sample has got 30 mil of moisture, and this is at the end of winter. So everything else is still dry, back down to the clay. Where we've 5 years been doing Soilkee 8 times, You can see the darkness of the soil, the carbon built up, all the root system, and holding the moisture. When you've got good fungal population in your soil structure, it holds the moisture in. It doesn't wick up and evaporate off the surface. So that's the stark difference. You know, like they're all worried about their water and their water rights and how much water they can get. But when you get it, you know, hang on to it and use it. Grow a plant with it. Don't just let it evaporate back off. So the ability of your capture of your CO2 out of the air really equates to the photosynthesis of the plant and the ability to get the air into the soil structure. The fungi creates aggregates in your soil, which is probably better in this photo. You can see your soil structure there. You've actually got all these aggregates in it. So that is got air around it. The air that we're breathing is 78% nitrogen. The legumes can pick it up and the free bacteria can pick it up in your soil as well. Then you look at your soil is your asset. It's your natural equity on your farm. So everything that's in that is your bank that you've got to utilise. Then the life in the soil are the managers of that nutrient. So if that nutrient is made available through the life in your soil, then you can utilise that asset of those nutrients to grow your crop and get somewhere. So it's really how you manage your farm, how you manage your soil, how you feed your soil. You're either leaching away nutrients that are disappearing into the waterways, or you're actually capturing nutrient and building your asset by building the carbon, making everything more resilient, building more topsoil, more profitable. And that's really the point where everything that you can put together heading into this scenario helps you get to that extra effort. So this here's a video on how it works. So you're only really disturbing that 17%, and most of the time the seeds will cover up on the back. But like this is a bit drier, and we're just pulling a set of tyres just to cover a bit more seed on the back. So it's a dusting out the front. It does the green manuring effect, covering up some of those green leaves, and then a bit of seed. That's it. So that's all it does. So there's very little disturbance. So you're not losing a lot of your soil life. The main thing it does is, in between the rows where it's worked, is actually keeping that fungal population ready to repopulate out what you've just actually fed. So you feed it twice a year in our climate. You know, if it's a bit dry climate, it's only once a year. You know, we've gone from that 3% organic matter to 10.7 in 5 years, where if it's a half, 900 metre rainfall, so you would end up in a half the rainfall, probably take twice as long to get there. Thank you.